Wednesday, the January 26, 1966, Australia Day, Somerton Park, Adelaide, South Australia, 8:41 in the morning. The sun had already turned the bitumen soft. South Australia was deep inside a summer heatwave, and the air over Holdfast Bay sat still and white and merciless. The Beaumont family lived at 109 Harding Street, Somerton Park, a quiet, unremarkable street in a quiet, unremarkable suburb a short distance from the sea. Jim Beaumont was a former serviceman, a man who had watched the world at its worst and come home to build something ordinary and decent. Nancy Beaumont was a homemaker. Their 3 children, Jane, aged 9, Arnna, aged 7, and Grant, just 4 years old, were the whole architecture of that ordinary life. On the morning of Australia Day, 1966, Nancy kissed them goodbye at the front door and watched them walk toward the bus stop in the heat. The children left home on the 8:45 in the morning bus. It was too hot to walk. Jane held her brother's hand. Arnna walked slightly ahead, the way 7-year-olds do, certain of their own speed and direction. The bus would have deposited them at Glenelg 5 minutes later. Their mother had given them 6pence for the bus fare home. The beach was a place that belonged to them, a place of bucket and spade summers, of salt water and sunburn and ship packets and the shriek of gulls over the breakwater. No one, not Nancy, not Jim, not the nation, had yet learned to be afraid of a crowded beach on a sunny public holiday. That lesson was coming. Police investigations would later reveal that several witnesses had seen the 3 children in the company of a tall man with fairish to light brown hair, a thin face with a suntanned complexion, and a medium build. In his mid-30s, he wore a blue swimsuit. He was lean the way a man is lean when he spends his time outdoors, not in a gymnasium, but in the kind of solitary, patient outdoors that leaves a mark. Witnesses recalled how the children behaved around him. Not afraid, not resistant, comfortable, even as if they had met him before. Arnna had previously told her mother that Jane had a boyfriend down the beach. Nancy had dismissed it as a cheeky joke. He had met them. He had made them laugh. He had given them something, a kindness, a game, a word that made them trust him. The shopkeeper at Bensel's Bakery on Mosley Street recalled Jane buying pasties and a meat pie with a £1 note. That pound note is perhaps the single most chilling artifact of this entire case, a piece of evidence that says the abduction did not begin on Australia Day. It began somewhere earlier, on some other morning, on some other hot afternoon. Nancy Beaumont expected the children home at noon. When the noon bus came and went without them, she began to worry. When the 2 o'clock bus arrived, and the footpath in front of the house remained empty, worry became fear. She stood at the window. She went to the door. She looked out the street at the shimmering heat and understood, the way mothers understand things before the mind allows it, that something had gone wrong. Jim Beaumont, who had been away on a work trip, returned home early at about 3 in the afternoon and drove straight to Glenelg to search for the children himself. He could not find them. At 5:30 that evening, Jim and Nancy went to the Glenelg police station to report their children missing. The beach was still crowded when Jim walked it. Families, couples, teenagers on towels, and nowhere could he find 3 small children in a sundress and shorts. He called them names. He described them to strangers. He walked the length of the foreshore with the desperate, disbelieving energy of a man who is certain he will find them any moment. Within 24 hours, the entire nation was aware of the case. Within 3 days, the Adelaide Sunday Mail led with the headline, "Sex Crime Now Fear." That headline marked the end of something. Not just for the Beaumont family, but for Australia itself. The doors that had always been left unlocked began to close. The children who had always walked to school alone were driven in cars. The beach, which had always been a public and innocent place, became a place where mothers scanned the faces of strangers. The country did not announce this change. It simply made it, quietly, in the weeks and months after Glenelg. As the search expanded and the silence from the children deepened into something permanent and terrible. On the November 8, 1966, a Dutch psychic named Gerard Crozet was brought to Australia to assist in the search, which caused a furor in the press. He spoke of visions. He described a building near the children's home with a brick kiln. The public, desperate and willing to believe anything that offered hope, raised $40,000 to have the building demolished. No remains were found, not then, and not when the site was searched again in 1996. Crozet returned to Europe. Jim and Nancy Beaumont returned to a house that was too quiet. They separated in the years that followed. because grief at that magnitude does not always hold a family together. Sometimes it tears straight through. For decades, suspects circled the case like dark shapes beneath still water. Then, the rabbit hole deepened in 2013 when two brothers told police that a factory owner had asked them to dig a ditch on his property on Australia Day 1966. Harry Phipps, a wealthy Adelaide businessman, a member of the city's social elite, a man who threw parties and was sat in and lived 300 meters from the beach. He was wealthy and known to be in the habit of giving out £1 notes, was later alleged to have been a paedophile, and lived only 300 meters from the beach on the corner of Augusta Street and Sussex Street. Phipps's strange son, Hayden, who was 15 at the time of the disappearance, came forward to researchers in 2007 with the claim that he had seen the children in his father's yard on 26 January. He also told police that he himself had been violently abused by his father as a child. The portrait of Harry Phipps that emerged was not the portrait of a charming Adelaide gentleman. It was something else entirely. There was a cottage at the Castelloy factory that was off limits to all staff except Phipps himself, a private space inside an industrial site, a room that belonged only to him. 2 days after the children disappeared, Phipps had paid two teenage boys to dig a deep hole in a sandy area of the factory grounds. The boys were given no reason for it. There was no clear purpose they could identify. They dug, they were paid. They went home, and for nearly 50 years, they carried the memory of that hot afternoon and that inexplicable hole and said nothing. Not until a television program jogged the image from wherever it had been buried, and one of them pointed at a face on a screen and said, "That was him, that was the man who had us dig." In 2013, investigators excavated the Castelloy site. In 2018, they returned with specialized equipment. Animal bones and general rubbish were found, but nothing related to the Beaumont case. In February 2025, based on new evidence, South Australian MP Frank Pangallo organised a third, privately funded excavation at the site. The week-long search did not find any remains of the children. More than 3,000 cubic meters of earth were moved. Forensic archaeologists worked in the heat of a new South Australian summer. Nearly 60 years after three children took a bus to the beach and never came home, they found nothing. Nancy Beaumont died at an Adelaide nursing home at 92 years old in 2019. She died without an answer. She had spent 53 years waiting not for justice, which had long since become an abstraction, but simply for the knowledge of what happened to her children, whether they had suffered, whether they had been frightened, whether in the last moments of their short lives they had called for her. Jim Beaumont is still alive. He is still in Adelaide. He is still waiting. In 2025, excavations at the former Castelloy site made national headlines once again, even though they failed to uncover any remains. That alone says everything about the case's grip on the Australian imagination. Decades later, people are still searching, still hoping, and still. Because this was not just the disappearance of three children, this was the disappearance of a kind of Australia, the one that existed before Glenelg, before the locked doors and the driven children, and the suspicion that settled like dust over every stranger's face on every beach in the country. That Australia caught the noon bus home. It never arrived. Jane would be 68 years old today. Arnna, 66, Grant, 64, three people who should be grandparents somewhere in this country, growing old in the ordinary way. Instead, they are the age they were on Australia Day 1966. 7, 4, fixed in amber, fixed in a single summer morning that never ended. Somewhere beneath a city that has grown up around its own secrets, or in a bushland south of Adelaide, where the heat still bends the horizon the same way it did 60 years ago somewhere, they are still waiting to be found. The bus didn't bring them home. Nothing has. Not yet.